So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night in the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in this podcast, I love talking about things, movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing The Long Walk. So, let's get into it, shall we? The Long Walk is the third Stephen King movie adaptation to come out this year. Yes, the third Stephen King movie adaptation. The first this year was The Monkey, which I didn't like, and the second that came out this year was The Life of Chuck, which I reviewed not too long ago on this channel, and that film wasn't for me, and this is the third of his movie adaptations to come out this year alone. There's another one of his movie adaptations coming out late this year in The Running Man, which is directed by Edgar Wright, and it's starring Glenn Powell, which I'm very, very much looking forward to because I'm a huge Edgar Wright fan, as I've spoken about quite a bit on this channel in the past. But back onto this film, back onto The Long Walk. This film is directed by Francis Lawrence. Francis Lawrence, who's probably most famous for directing the likes of I Am Legend, Constantine, and all the previous Hunger Games movies, including the Hunger Games prequel movie, which came out a couple of years ago now. So Francis Lawrence is quite an interesting director. He's been around in the business for a while, and although I didn't like the last Hunger Games movie, I still thought it was well made. Not one of my issues with the last Hunger Games movie was the directing. So when I heard that he was directing this film, I was like, okay, that's a good director to direct a film like this. Plus, you have a great cast in this film, led by the likes of Cooper Hoffman, which many people might know from the likes of Licorice Pizza, and he was also in Saturday Night, the movie all about the first SNL, which aired in 1975, which I think came out earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. It came out this year in the UK, and I think in the US it came out last year. Yeah, he was in that, and he was he's been in quite a few things now. He's actually becoming this rising star. He is the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman, which I'm sure many people will know of. And this film also stars David Johnson, which many people might know as the android from Alien Romulus. I also know him from Rye Lane, which I think it was his first film, or one of his first films anyway. Rye Lane is such a good movie. It's so underappreciated in my opinion. Yeah, David Johnson, who was great in Alien Romulus and also great in Rye Lane, he is in this film. And Mark Hamill, yes, Luke Skywalker himself, is in this film too. This is the second Stephen King movie adaptation that he starred in this year. He was in The Life of Chuck, and he is in this film too, playing roles that are different but also not too dissimilar at the same time. I think if you've seen both of the movies, or if you've seen The Life of Chuck and if you've seen The Long Walk, you'll see there are similarities in both of the characters. They are different, and Mark Hamill plays them differently, but there's also similarities in both of the characters at the same time. So yes, you have a great cast leading this film. You have a great couple of cast members leading this movie, and the biggest reason I was looking forward to this film was because of the premise. Like, if you don't know the premise already, basically it goes as follows. Teens participate in a grueling high-stakes contest where they must continuously walk or be shot, yes, or be shot by a member of their military escort. And when I heard that was the premise for this movie, I was like, okay, now you've got my interest. You got a good cast leading this film. You got a good director. You have me interested. Plus, it's based on a Stephen King novel. I think it's based on a Stephen King short story, and I'm pretty sure I heard that this was the first novel that he wrote. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I heard online from a film pundit that I follow, who's very reliable for the most part. He said that this is based on the first Stephen King novel that he wrote. So when I heard that it was based on Stephen King, Stephen King, if you don't know already, many of his classic novels have been adapted into classic movies with the likes of The Shawshank Redemption, The Shining, It, Misery, Carrie. I mean, I could go on. Stand By Me. There are plenty of Stephen King novels which have been adapted into classic, and I mean classic movies with a capital C. So yeah, when I heard that this was a Stephen King adaptation, I was immediately interested, because sometimes Stephen King films, well, not sometimes, a lot of the times, Stephen King films have this sort of twisted sensibility. Stephen King adaptations have this sort of twisted nature to their movies. Plus, you got a good cast and you got a good director. expect, and the premise of the film had me sold. So I went to go and see the film on a Saturday night with one of my mates, and I was honestly expecting this sort of visceral, violent horror movie. And although the film is that, it's also a film about friendship, and it's a film about companionship. And it actually became a heartfelt film that I didn't expect it to be. And also, to me, it kind of became a film about how everybody, in their own way, in their own lives, everybody in this world is on this continuous long walk, and eventually we will all die. And I know that's kind of depressing, but that's what I took from the film. And yeah, I ended up really liking this film. It's not without its flaws, and I would say I wish there was more of a backstory to certain characters. Like, sometimes we are told a backstory to certain characters in this movie that we may or may not see certain things happen to, but I would have liked there to be shown a backstory. You know, it goes back to that thing which people talk about with movies all the time. Show, don't tell. And I do think this movie does a little more telling and not showing. I would have preferred there, at the start of the film, to be some, like, short little flashback scenes to each character, each of the main characters that we follow in this film, to explain where they came from, why they're doing this walk, which is quite literally going to be life or death for them. I would have liked there to be a bit more of a flashback. I'm not saying loads of flashbacks, I'm not saying that at all. And we do get some flashbacks with Cooper Hoffman's character, but like with David Johnson's character, I think if you had a couple more flashbacks there, I would have attached myself to his character a bit more. Same with some of the other characters that we follow throughout the film, that we start to, you know, get somewhat of an allegiance to. I would have liked there to be more showing and not telling, and perhaps we get to see some cutaways to what these characters' pasts were like. And I did like Mark Hamill in the film. I think Mark Hamill was really good, and I love how, you know, recently he's been playing against the Luke Skywalker type, you know, for the longest time. And I still think now, actually, he is best known for playing Luke Skywalker, which I think he's taken in his stride. But at the same time, I love when he plays against that. Well, I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Clearly, just look behind me. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker. But I also like when he plays against the role. He played against the role in The Life of Chuck. I thought it was the best part of The Life of Chuck, which came out earlier this year. And I don't think he's the best part of this film. I think the best performance in this film is David Johnson. I mean, I think David Johnson's going to be one of those stars you'll see winning an Oscar in like the next 5 years. But yeah, I don't think he's the best performance in this film. And I do think that he kind of comes across as a bit of a caricature at times. He kind of comes across... I would have liked to see more of a range from him in this film, but he's still really good in this movie, and I liked Mark Hamill in this film. I just wish I loved him. I wish he was one of those Stephen King villains. You know, the villains you get in Stephen King novels, which you end up really detesting. And he didn't become one of those sort of villains for me. He's a good villain in this film, but I wouldn't say he's a great villain. So yeah, that's one of my other criticisms. And I'm not going to give away what happens in the film, obviously. I'm not going to give away what happens in the film, but the ending worked for me. However, it was a little predictable. I guessed what was going to happen in the end pretty early on, and I kind of wish that I didn't. But I did think the ending was predictable, and I did think that maybe there could have been a more twisted nature to the ending. But the ending happened, I was like, okay, it was a good ending. It was well done. There was nothing that bad about the ending. I just wish there was more to it. I don't think they quite got the ending correct. I think there should have been like an extra twist there, because there was again, without going into spoilers, there was something in the ending which I think some people won't see coming. I saw coming, but I think some people won't see coming. But I do wish that the ending had a bit more of I just wish it had a bit more something to it, you know? That being said, the film is still worth a watch. It's engaging, and I was surprised by how much I was engaged by it, because for a film like this, where you're just watching people walk for, you know, the best part of 2 hours, that's literally what you're doing in the film. I mean, there's a couple of scenes where you're not watching people walk, but for the most part in this film, you're watching a group of characters walk from one spot to another spot, from one spot to the destination. So for a film where you're just following characters walk, I think Francis Lawrence does a great job at keeping you engaged, and I also think that the writing does a good job at keeping you engaged. Again, I do think the writing could have been a little bit better, maybe a little more emotionally engaging, but for the most part I do think the writing works, and I think the film does a good job at keeping you engaged for the sort of film that it is. Plus, although it wasn't entirely the film I expected it to be, there were still violent and visceral moments in the film which did shock me and were convincing. There were quite a few moments when, I'm not going to say which characters were shot, but there were certain characters that were shot in the film. It's not a spoiler if you watch the trailer for the film. You know that if a character slows down on this long walk, or if a character stops on this long walk, then they get shot. And when they get shot, it's totally believable and it's shocking at the same time. And seeing how these characters deal with not being able to stop, seeing how these characters deal with the likes of going to the toilet, with how their feet are getting sore, with how they're struggling with this continuous and endless long walk, is done very well. And the performances, as I already briefly touched on earlier in this review, are very good. Cooper Hoffman, I am looking forward to seeing so much more stuff. I love him in this film, and I think Cooper Hoffman is a great actor. David Johnson, I do think is a standout in the film. I think he's a standout in most films he's in. He'll stand out in the Alien film he was in, which came out last year, Alien Romulus, which I forgot the name of it off the top of my head then. But yeah, he's brilliant in the film, and he did an American accent, and he's not American in real life. And I think he did a very believable American accent. And Mark Hamill, I liked in the film, I just didn't love, but I think that's more to do with the writing, not so much with Mark Hamill's performance. So yeah, I thought all the performances, and also the performances I haven't mentioned, were all great, and the film itself was it was what I expected it to be, but it wasn't at the same time. And I like when films like that. It's sort of like 28 Years Later, which came out earlier this year. 28 Years Later was the film I expected it to be, but it also wasn't. It became this heartfelt film about loss. And although this film is different than 28 Years Later, it also isn't at the same time. You know, you go into this film expecting a violent and visceral and tough film to watch, and you get that, but it also becomes this sort of heartfelt film about friendship and about companionship and about sticking with one another in the toughest of times. And like I said before, I came away from this film thinking about how the film's kind of a metaphor about how we are all on this endlessly long walk that is constantly tough and constantly challenging us, and you know, we just have to keep going until we eventually die. And I know that's a depressing thing to think about, but that's what I took from the film. And you know, although the film didn't work for me on all its cylinders, I have been thinking more about it since I saw it on Saturday than I thought I was going to. Heck, I've been thinking more about this film than I've been thinking more about The Life of Chuck. The Life of Chuck quickly escaped my memory after I saw it, but The Long Walk, although I only saw it about 3 days ago now, it has stuck with me more than I thought I was going to. More than I thought it was going to. You know, maybe in a couple of years' time, or maybe in the next year, I will rewatch this film and it'll work for me a lot more. But for now, I still think this is a very solid film with a lot of great parts to it. I just wouldn't say it's a great film overall. And so, all in all, I am going to say that The Long Walk, yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7 point. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. That sounds like a harsh rating, but in reality, would I give it a 7.5 out of 10? You know what? Yeah, I'm sticking with that rating. I'm giving it a 7.5 out of 10 because a lot of the film worked to me, but there are still parts of the film where I just thought it could have been better. Like maybe a couple of flashbacks with some of the characters that we learn more about in the film as the film progresses. And I do think that maybe there were a couple of missed opportunities. Like it would have been interesting when perhaps we see these one of the kids, one of these young adults who are on this long walk. It would have been interesting to see one of them jump off a bridge and into the river and manage to get away from the military. That could have been interesting, and the film Yeah, the film doesn't really do anything. The film doesn't really go in that direction. It's more about this long walk, and I do feel there were a couple of missed opportunities. And again, the ending didn't quite work for me as much as I hoped it would. You know, sometimes you think about the best Stephen King movie adaptations, and the endings are always perfect. Think about the ending to The Shawshank Redemption, perfect. Think about the ending to Stand By Me, perfect. Think about the ending to Carrie, perfect. You know, you look at the best Stephen King movie adaptations, and the endings, when they work well, work so well. And I'm not sure if the ending to this film worked as well as it could have. That being said, there's a lot to like in the film, and again, I had a really good time watching it. It was not the film I expected it to be, and I really liked that about it. I liked that it surprised me. I went in expecting one film, and I still got that film, but I also got something else at the same time. And yeah, for that reason, it really worked to me, and I thought it was a really solid film. Just not a great film. But my mind may change when I rewatch the film in time to come, you know? My mind may change, because the film has stuck with me, and it has stuck with me more than I thought it was going to. So, you know, again, maybe my opinion will change. But for now, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, I really liked The Long Walk, and that is why I'm going to say once more that it's a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen The Long Walk, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please click down below and like and subscribe on this video. And look forward to many more videos and many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.